Welcome back everyone, I hope you're all well. In today's video we're going to be looking at the second book in the Wheel of Time series, The Great Hunt. Before we start the video I'd just like to say there are going to be spoilers for The Eye of the World and some minor spoilers for The Great Hunt, so if those things bother you, please don't watch any further. The Great Hunt features young heroes Rand al'Thor, Mat Cuthon and Perrin Aybara who join the Shinarian soldiers in a quest to retrieve the Horn of Valir. At the same time, Egwene Al'Vir, Nynaeve Almira and Elaine Trakand go to the White Tower in Tar Valon to learn Aes Sedai ways. Finally, an exotic army invades the western coast. Part 1. Striking out on one's own. Like The Eye of the World, The Great Hunt mostly focuses on telling Rand's story, although we do start to get more and more chapters in this book looking at the perspectives of other characters. That being said, it's still Rand's arc that predominates in this novel, and at least for me, it's Rand's arc that I found the most interesting. So at the end of The Eye of the World, Rand found out that he was not only able to channel, he's a male channeler, but also that he is prophesized as the Dragon Reborn. This story primarily concerns the fallout of those revelations, as Rand has to come to terms with not only the fact that he's a male channeler and is therefore, prophesized to become insane, but also he has to come to terms with the fact that he's the Dragon Reborn, which has even bigger implications for him and also the people around him. This is the novel where we start to see an increase in Rand's paranoia, and also his disconnecting relationships between himself and his close friends. One of the things that I really liked about the first novel is how realistically Jordan is able to capture the psychological effects that his journey and that the story is having on the characters. And this is something that's carried through really well in this story. Like in the first novel, Jordan does an excellent job capturing the psychological effects that the events of the story is having on the characters, especially Rand. One of the key things that happens in this novel is that Rand becomes more isolated from the people around him. First of all, Moiraine no longer travels with Rand. This is significant because in the first novel, although Rand was somewhat distrustful of Moiraine, she was the guide of that novel. She's the person who kept him and the other Emond's Fielders grounded and taught them about the world around them. With Moiraine gone, Rand is left to his own devices and he has to deal with the repercussions of the previous novel on his own. We even see the men that Rand travels with in the story, fully grown men, respect him and look up to him in a way where Rand is now taking on more of a leadership role. He's no longer just a child following Moiraine, his guide. He's someone who other people look up to, and he has to take the lead sometimes, and he has to grow on his own. Not only is this great for character building, but it also gives us some great foreshadowing as to where Rand's character might be going in the future. Rand also finds him separated from Nynaeve and Egwene in this story, as they travel to the White Tower, and at one point in the novel he even chooses to split with Mat and Perrin to get away from them and deal with the stuff going on in his head. All of this stuff allows Jordan to really focus on and develop Rand's psychology as he's going through this journey. And it's one of the key aspects of the Wheel of Time series, it's one of the best aspects of the Wheel of Time series, and it's the thing that I enjoyed most about reading this novel was seeing how Rand's character is developing and shifting away from this innocent farm boy into someone who is more unsure of himself, more paranoid and more afraid. Part 2. Mounting complexities. The Eye of the World is primarily a somewhat typical fantasy adventure story. I would go as far to say that it's probably the most simplistic story, plot-wise, of every book in the Wheel of Time series. The Great Hunt also follows a similar plot structure in terms of its simplicity, but in this novel we start to get hints at the complex world building and vast cast of characters that are going to be more and more developed in the novels to come. We also get the introduction of morally ambivalent characters who add complexity and nuance to the story. There are a couple of villains in this story who come out of nowhere and are completely unexpected, and this is great considering how predictable the first book in the series was. We also get the introduction of one of Jordan's most interesting but at the same time hateable races, the Seanchan. The Seanchan are one of my favourite races in the Wheel of Time series. Not only is their culture interesting, but it's also very much at odds with the culture and moral system of the people in the Wheel of Time. Also, while in this novel the Seanchan play out mainly as villains, their relationship in later novels with the other races and people of the continent will become more and more developed and more nuanced. It's definitely one of Jordan's best races, and it's definitely one of his most interesting. Further adding to the complexity of this book and the series is the girls' arrival at the White Tower. Here we start to get a bit of an insight into the White Tower, into the different sects of the Aes Sedai, and the politics going on there. Overall, there's a lot of added complexity and nuance to The Great Hunt, which is something that I appreciated more, I found, on my second read, because there's a lot going on here that you just don't really appreciate until you've seen what's to come in the later books. So not only is that a good reason to enjoy this book, because you're getting, better world building, but it's also something to appreciate when you're on a reread of the series. Part 3. Plotting problems. If I had to point to one criticism of The Great Hunt, it would pretty much be the same criticism that I had of The Eye of the World, which is that the plotting is again a bit rushed. For most of the novel, we have character-based interactions, we're exploring Rand's psychology, we're exploring how the girls are getting on at the White Tower, and then towards the end of the novel, we just end up with a somewhat contrived situation that winds everyone back together again, for again another kind of big boss type battle, and it just doesn't sit right with me in terms of pacing. While it is nice to see the characters coming together, at the same time, if they have to come together in a way that just feels contrived and rushed, then that's going to dampen your satisfaction of the conclusion of the story. That being said, I do think The Great Hunt has a slight edge on The Eye of the World, in that the climax overall is a much more satisfying one than it was in The Eye of the World. It made sense given the themes of the story that this is where the characters would end up for the most part, and also the way that things came together was a little bit more satisfying this time around, even if it did feel a bit rushed. That being said, I do think it's something that could have been done better, and it's a pacing problem, and pacing is just something that, if any of you have read the series overall, it's just a problem that's going to keep cropping up here and there, but in these early books at least, the pacing isn't really that bad, and it just shouldn't really, destroy your satisfaction of the book overall. It certainly didn't destroy mine. Part 4. Conclusion. Overall, I think The Great Hunt is an excellent entry in the Wheel of Time series, and it's definitely one of my personal favourites. It mainly chronicles Rand's discovery and the aftermath of that discovery of his powers and the prophecy about the Dragon Reborn, and it does this in a way that's realistic and interesting to read, and it's not stale given that, again, we're looking at a story that's about a chosen one. It doesn't feel stale at all. In fact, it feels very unique and very fresh. We also get the introduction of new characters and races, which adds further complexity to the world building and to the cast of characters. We also get to focus on the psychologies of other characters as more and more chapters get devoted to the likes of Nynaeve, Egwene, and Perrin. Yes, the climax is a little bit rushed and there are some pacing issues, but overall, this is a fantastic story and definitely worth a read. Yeah, the climax might be a bit rushed, but The Great Hunt is a fantastic part of the Wheel of Time series and definitely a highlight for me. Alright, that's it for today's video. If you liked, please like and subscribe, and comment below what are your thoughts on The Great Hunt, on the Wheel of Time, and what sort of videos do you want to see in the future. Feel free to look at my other reviews of the Wheel of Time series, and be on the lookout because I'll definitely be going through this series as I go through my reread. Take care guys, and I'll see you all in the next video.